everyone, Sam here, your mother of Valkyries and host of the Sword and the Ribbon podcast. Today, Valkyrie Squad's resident dietitian, Morgan Chojnacki, is back to talk about nutrition and how it affects hormones. She is a MS, RDN, CD, and CDCES. She's a diet and nutrition specialist with an undergraduate degree in biology from Illinois Institute of Technology and a master's degree in nutritional sciences with a focus in dietetics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Morgan approaches nutrition as someone who loves and appreciates all foods, which I am so thankful for. This episode contains a trigger warning. This episode contains themes about body weight, diet culture, eating habits, eating disorders, and mental illness. If any of those topics are something that will upset you or cause any type of negative impact, I would recommend skipping this episode. Hi, Morgan.
Hey, Sam.
Welcome back to the podcast.
I am so excited to be back.
So glad you said yes again. You're just a season regular now.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dive right into it. Can you give a quick dust jacket summary of who you are and what all those letters after your name are to remind the listeners and myself?
Yes. I have to preface this with saying, I always feel like Dame Maggie Smith when she babbling, bumbling band of baboons when I list off all my things. But they're all my education and credentials. So I have a Master of Science in Nutritional Sciences. RDN is Registered Dietitian Nutritionist. CDCES is CD is Certified Dietitian. And then CDCES is Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist, which used to be called Diabetes Educator. And I actually finished another certification since our last conversation on here, although I don't use the letters after the name. So I'm also a certified intuitive eating counselor. So as dietitians, we're always working to continue education and maintain current research and knowledge and everything. So
I can't remember if it's part 1 or part 2 that you actually talked about intuitive eating. I cannot remember which episode it is.
I don't know. Probably a little bit of both because I always use the principles even though I wasn't certified yet.
I know it's helped so many Valkyries. I watched I lurk in the nutrition channel.
Yes.
So now for some fun questions. What was the best book you read in 2023 so far? Or wait, we're 2024. Oh my God, I don't know what year it is. So what was the best book you read in 2023?
Wow, that's hard one to answer. I think it's probably, I don't know, maybe Fourth Wing, not the second book, but the first one in particular, because when I read that one, I just remember just having that feeling that I got the first time I read like ACOTAR. It was just like, oh my gosh, I need to read this again. And it like ruined me for other books for a while. So I feel like it was probably that. Although Serpent and the Wings of Night series was probably a very close second.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, you did read that in 2023.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite food obsession lately?
As embarrassing as this is, I've been chasing the avocado toast since our trip to Colorado Springs last year. The one that they had at Loyal Coffee was just like absolute delicious. And I have been trying to make the best one since.
If my schedule wasn't so jam-packed this weekend, I'd say we'll go have a Loyal avocado toast for you this weekend, but I don't think there's time for that. But I understand your obsession for the avocado toast. It's like you're a Californian, an honorary Californian.
So good. It's just so good.
It is. Mark likes to put sometimes yogurt underneath the avocado toast or underneath the avocado.
I haven't tried that one yet.
Yeah. He'll put like a thin little layer on that just to add extra fatty, like umami texture taste. I don't know. I just eat the food I'm placed in front of me.
I add the Crunchers mung beans. They're like a dried, crunchy. Oh my, those are an obsession. I always have to buy cases of them and keep them in the house because I put them on everything. But I do add those to avocado toast. And again, just perfection.
Yes. Okay. So what's your favorite place you've traveled in the past year? You've been a lot of places.
I was going to say, I did the most traveling I've ever done in 2023. And well, all have been amazing. Hands down, Sydney. Like going to Sydney, Australia was just 1,000 out of 10. I recommend.
One day I will get there.
It's worth it.
It's amazing. So like, because you did obviously just ran on vacation. How do you stay motivated to run and work out while you're on vacation? Besides when you're traveling with me and I make you go to the gym with me.
I think running motivation is pretty easy for me because I just get excited about like the sights that I'll see. And so I'm always thinking of like, ooh, when I go there, I can try running through here. Or like, even I went to Denver earlier this year and it was like, I was just like, ooh, I just really want to go see what it feels like to run in the higher altitude. And it was awful, but I did it. But yeah, I think it's mostly that. It's how I feel. So I guess it's like, there's a lot of the people in the world that are saying, oh, wake up every day to make your bed so that you make sure you did one thing in the morning, right? And for me, it's like the exercise is what makes me feel like I've done something. It gets my blood pumping, my energy's better. That, and then like Chicago, like if I have a friend that wants to go run or go exercise or something, like, I don't know, I just make a really fun thing out of it. But I also don't let it like interfere with the trip. So like in Costa Rica, I think I worked out once or twice. And it didn't happen every day and I didn't feel bad about it.
I think that's what a lot of people like try to find that balance with. And I know, so we talk about a lot in the squad is if it happens, it happens. If not, that's okay. I don't run. I just go walk all the places.
Same thing though, right? I mean, you get out, it's just fun to have a different view than just like driving around.
Exactly. I'm like, let's just go walk that way just to go see, or like I'll pick like a coffee shop and like walk towards that coffee shop and then stop in all the things and see the town and the city.
Yeah, we just got like lost in Denver. We were like, let's just go run wherever we want and like find our way back home.
So lastly, if you could live in any of the Moss universes and probably go run in, which one would you pick?
Oh, absolutely Prithian. Most of my friends are like diehard Throne of Glass people, and so they think I'm crazy, but like it's not even close for me.
I feel like that's an obvious answer, but what court, honestly?
I mean, I like to think Night Court. I do, but I'm also a sunshine girly, so I don't know. Maybe day? I feel like we haven't explored enough of like day and dawn to like really know. But I love like sunrise time of day, so I don't know.
I just think of like day court is just actually in the clouds. Like it's not an actual like physical, like I picture it up in the sky the entire time. And I'm like, that's where it is. I know it's actually in a physical on the ground location, but it's in the sky in my head. And that's where it's staying.
You're just riding the magical Pegasus everywhere.
Yeah, that's literally what I picture. I'm like, this is all it is. All the other courts, all the seasonal courts are probably just actually down on the ground. Everything else is in the sky because it's solar.
The clouds.
Like I just see like Helion in day court just lounging on a big cloud throne.
Oh yeah, I get that mental image absolutely.
But big powerful thighs.
Powerful thighs.
See, I think you need to be in the day court because you're such a powerful runner that you have powerful thighs. So it's like you're just inclined to be there.
You know what? I will take Helion and his powerful thighs. That's fine with me. Deal.
Perfect. Ever wonder what the Valkyries eat when training in the summer court? Tarquin gave us his cook's recipe book. Discover the delights of seasonal cuisine with the Summer Court Seasonal Cookbook by Akatar Eats. Embrace the nutritious and cost-effective benefits of eating with nature's calendar. With almost 30 new recipes for every occasion and Akatar-themed, this will be your go-to guide for the summer. Every recipe is swap-friendly for vegetarian and other dietary concerns. Check out the Akatar Eats Instagram page at Akatar Eats to purchase and for more information. Well, so can you give a quick introduction to how hormones work and how they can be affected by various things?
Yeah, I will try to keep it as simple as possible. So hormones are chemicals made in the body by endocrine glands that are used to control body functions. You can kind of think of them as like signals or messages that are used to communicate with the body. So endocrine glands make hormones, send them through the bloodstream to their target cells, where they can bring about changes to that cell or to like the surrounding tissues. There's a lot of things that hormones do. So some systems that they affect are like growth, repair, reproduction, digestion, sleep-wake cycles, mood, homeostasis, which is the word for keeping things balanced and stable in the body. Just like everything else, our body wants to stay tightly regulated. So hormones are regulated by other hormones, proteins, neurons, signals in the body, just everything in the body wants to stay the same. There are way too many to get into But some of the main glands and organs in the system include the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the parathyroid, adrenal glands, pancreas, ovaries, testes, adipose or fatty tissue, kidneys, and gut. We don't have enough time in the world for me to go over all of the hormones, but I do want to mention a few. So some of the hormones involved in metabolism include insulin, leptin, ghrelin, and the thyroid hormones. Insulin's released from the pancreas after you eat. It takes sugar from the blood to the cells for energy and then stores excess sugar as fat. Leptin is released from fat cells to help tell the brain that you're full. So that's actually known as like the satiety hormone. It's what makes you feel satisfied. And ghrelin is often called the hunger hormone. It's responsible for stimulating your appetite. And I always remember this one because I think you're about your stomach growling.
Yep. I was like, it sounds like a gremlin growling.
Yes. So I always think of, I always remember ghrelin very well. And then the T3 and T4 are some of the thyroid hormones that are used to regulate weight, energy, and temperature. Other ones that people are probably familiar with, cortisol, adrenaline, melatonin, those are all like stress and mood hormones. Cortisol and adrenaline are specifically released in sort of times of stress and fight or flight. And then melatonin is what helps your body get ready for sleep. And then the reproductive hormones, so estrogen, responsible for menstrual cycles, maintaining pregnancy, cholesterol, bone strength, and then testosterone that increases sex drive, bone density, muscle strength. So, and yes, those are just the surface.
Just the surface. I felt like I just opened a really big can of worms.
But when hormones are dysregulated, that leads to problems, right? And so that's like where diabetes comes in, menstrual abnormalities, infertility, hyper or hypothyroidism, endocrine tumors. I mean, there's a lot. So hormonal imbalance is when you have too much or too little of the hormones, and this can be temporary or it can be chronic. So, and then some require treatment and some don't, right? So it's just kind of different things. Certain periods of life will affect different hormones. So, puberty, health, pregnancy, menopause are some of the main ones that, as a woman myself, I think of, right? But stress, diet, medications, all of those can be affected or can affect your hormones as well.
Okay, so how does food specifically affect your hormones?
In the simplest way, what we eat affects the production of hormones and their signaling pathways. So the energy and nutrients that you get from food are basically like the raw materials that we're using to produce hormones and fuel in our bodies. Hormones are affected by eating too much. They're also affected by eating too little. So that's the one I think a lot of people forget. And our hormones really like things found in sort of what a lot of people might traditionally think of as like the Mediterranean diet. So an eating pattern that's rich in like healthy fats, very plant forward, full of high quality lean proteins. And our hormones really don't like alcohol, artificial sweeteners, pesticides, eating too much or not eating enough. So all the things that you would think of, right? But in specific cases, like there are some nutrients that play specific roles. So adequate iodine, selenium, and iron are really important for the thyroid. So we always think about like one of the most common causes of hypothyroidism is actually iodine deficiency. And then things like high simple carb intake can increase glucose or sugar levels, which causes an increased need for insulin in the body. And it can also cause an impact to how sensitive your body is to the insulin and in the body. So there's a lot there. We following along, okay? I don't want to kind of go too much. Okay.
There's a lot of like questions and avenues that I want to like take it down, but I'm like, we should keep it simplified and not run off on a million tangents. So many questions, but I do remember you telling me a story about a 70-year-old woman who bikes all summer and only eats 2 meals.
Yes, I remember her vividly. It was a really interesting visit. She was in like her mid-70s and she had type 2 diabetes and she had never seen a dietitian before. And she spends every summer cycling through France. So they stay at like hotels, they wake early, cycle all day to the next spot and repeat. And so she was like eating before they left the hotel and then going all day long and then eating like when they got to the next hotel. And she reported like over the past few years, she noticed that mid-cycling, she'd experienced this like weird numbness in her legs where she would actually have to stop pedaling. And it would last like a minute or two. And everybody would just kind of like get ahead of her. And so she'd have to work extra hard to like catch back up with everyone. And she's like, the doctors have run all sorts of tests. They can't find anything wrong, but like maybe it's my diabetes. Let's talk about that. And I found out that nobody at any point had ever asked her what she eats. It never came up from any doctor ever. They're just like, let's draw more blood. Let's look at this. And so I asked a lot of questions, and she's not eating all day. She's not drinking. So she said she might drink like some of her water bottle during the day, but she didn't want to have to stop to use the bathroom because it was just too hard or there weren't bathrooms because a lot of their biking was through the countryside. And so there's a lot going on here, right? And so I'm like, sure, maybe it could be the diabetes to a certain extent, but I was like, athletes need more nutrients, and especially in the carb form when exercising. So like, it really depends on the level, but people need like 30 to 60 grams of carb per hour, and then like 60 to 90 grams per hour for anything over 2 hours. So we're talking, even if it's like 8 hours a day, like 90 grams of carb per hour, like she is really, really, really lacking here. And she was like, well, we don't go very fast. She's like, we're in our 70s. We're biking through the hills in France. And I'm like, okay, but your need increases with length, not necessarily the intensity, right? So people that are out there running like 4 or 5, 6 hour marathons are actually probably needing to fuel. Well, not probably. They are needing to fuel and having more stress on their body than the 2.5 hour marathoner. So, and the undernutrition messes with hormones. It can lead to fatigue, difficult recovery, muscle loss. So, and then with her, we have this diabetes aspect too, right? And so we know that her sugar's not regulated throughout the day. And so I'm thinking at some point she's probably hitting super low. And then her body's like, well, we got to figure this out, and it'll release any stores of sugar that it has. And at some point she's probably like burning fat and muscle in order to make up for not having enough sugar. And anyway, a lot going on with her hormones. And so I was just trying to talk to her about like, well, what can we do? So the other thing, in terms of hormones, right? So she's having these huge cycling changes in ghrelin and insulin. Going a long period of time without food, her ghrelin's kicking out. It's causing her liver to release sugar, and then her body has to overcompensate by releasing insulin in order to get the sugar back out. And it's this vicious cycle. And then on top of that, I also think about salt sweat or like sweat rates, right? So, in the summer in France and cycling, like even if you're not a heavy salty sweater, you can lose like 500 milligrams of sodium per pound of sweat. So we're talking about like up to 2,500 milligrams per hour during the day. And so she's like prime example of like salty snacks or at least electrolytes on the road in order to keep things going. So if she's not getting enough, she's going to have vasopressin released by the pituitary gland, which tells the kidneys that she's dehydrated, and it could cause swelling, dizziness, headaches, disorientation. Yeah. So, and then on top of that, she's like, I have to carry everything with me. So I can't carry all this stuff. I can't bring a lot of food. And so I ended up talking to her about like, let's get a continuous glucose monitor on while you're out there. So at least it can alert you if you're low. I talked about those like goo, carbohydrate things in order to like, every hour at least take 1 or 2 of those to keep some carbohydrate intake up. And then I also talked about those like shiwi products. It was like, if you don't want to squat, somewhere, at least maybe you can use a shiwi. I was like, practice during the year. But I'm excited to see her results. I saw her in like September, and so she wasn't going to be going again until like this month, and I haven't heard from her, but I really hope, I think fueling is going to be a huge thing for her.
Yeah, I really hope she has a successful trip. It sounds beautiful to do that.
Yeah.
But like,
well, and it sounds so scary though. Like, it's wild to me that nobody at any point ever asked her. I'm like, you're literally cycling all day, every day for months. Like, I don't even know how she's surviving. Like,
I would be wasted away.
I'd be so hangry
all the time, or I would have been passed out on the road, been like, well, here lies Sam.
Yeah.
She made it to France. She saw the countryside, and that was it. So how do carbs specifically affect hormones?
Yeah, so it sort of depends on the carb. There's simple carbs, complex carbs, and fiber, which all fall into that carb category. Simple carbs are basically like one or two sugar molecules, and so they're absorbed really, really quickly. And that's like sugar, honey, syrup. And then complex carbs are made up of like longer chains of sugar molecules, so they take a little bit longer to digest. So those are like your starches, potatoes, winter squash, grains like buckwheat, quinoa, oats, etc. And then fiber is actually like a non-digestible carbohydrate. So it's really important for like digestive health, regulating sugar levels, and many, many other things. I'm a big fiber pusher. But hormones that are affected by carbs are insulin, leptin, ghrelin, and then cortisol and thyroid hormones, right? So we've got like a bunch of stuff involved here. The simple carbs are digested so quickly that our bodies cannot always keep up, and that can lead to like a large spike in insulin. So, for example, things like high fructose corn syrup, which is found in a lot of our sodas and candies and even some juices, is associated with insulin resistance, weight gain, and metabolic syndrome because it's causing this like very large spike in insulin, and our bodies like they don't like. And then there's also an association between like high glycemic index foods. So think more simple carbs that cause bigger sugar spikes and ovulatory infertility. So again, kind of looking at these more complex carbs for people that are experiencing these hormone disruptions. On the other hand, complex carbs, high fiber foods, they can help regulate leptin and ghrelin, which leads to better appetite control. So in most cases, the vast majority of cases, more fiber is better. The exception to that is people with really low hormone levels. If they like hypothyroid, if they take too much fiber, it can actually interfere with the uptake of hormones. And so that's where like talking to a dietitian about your special case and like how to take your meds with fiber and all that's going to be really important. But then, again, kind of the other side of this coin, if you don't eat enough carbs, that also causes hormone imbalances, and that leads to loss of bone density, increased inflammation, impaired heart health, lower mood, increased abdominal fat storage. So there's like an interesting controlled study that those that were on a very low carbohydrate diet were actually found to have the highest levels of cortisol. So and then cortisol is leading to like more of those fat deposits. So like I talked to people, I think I said it last time too, like I talked to a lot of people that are trying to like lose weight about eating more, because if you're not getting enough, everything's getting messed up. And then I know I've talked about this kind of before, that like low carb diets suppress like your levels of leptin. I didn't use those words, but meaning that you can't get satisfied or you experience a lot more hunger. But then the other side of low leptin is amenorrhea, or the loss of your menstrual cycle, so in those with a uterus. So, that's usually one of the really big signs for especially athletes that they're not getting enough nutrition, is that, you lose your menstrual cycle, and that's never a good thing. We don't want to see that. And then thinking about like your thyroid hormones and stuff. So levels of T3 decrease really rapidly in women that follow a low carb diet. And then once more carbs are consumed, those actually come back to normal. And low T3 causes low concentration, low mood, and weight gain. So yes, the optimal amount of carb depends on each person. But generally, like we recommend at least 130 grams of carb a day. And so if you're thinking about things like, let's say a keto diet, they recommend like 20, maybe 30 grams of carb a day. And so there's this huge lack in information about what is this doing to your hormones, or what could this be doing to you?
Now, I do know this is in part 2 of your previous episodes, that, the fad diets and toxic fitness culture, like some of those diets were created specifically for specific people with specific disorders, etc., that the low carb diet was specifically meant for these type of people. They shouldn't be for the overall majority.
Yeah, so specifically keto was developed for people with epilepsy, and there's actually some research and some sort of newer stuff that people with brain tumors can also benefit from it. And it's, again, it's sort of like your brain uses carbs for energy, and forcing it to use fat can kind of, I guess, help in treatment of these various diseases. But for the general population, definitely not recommended.
No. So moving on, I'm going to actually lump two. I know they're completely different, but I'm going to lump them together because I'm very curious to know. What about caffeine and alcohol? How does it affect hormone levels?
So caffeine has a huge effect on the hormones, but the main hormones that seem to be affected by caffeine is cortisol, insulin, and estrogen. And it really depends on health status, genetics, ethnicity, like how often are you having caffeine, right? People are going to be affected a little bit differently. And it's actually really challenging. Like I read so much research on the caffeine aspect, but researchers are really hard to they're having trouble pinpointing exactly what is affected and why. And it's like so complex. But a lot of the studies on caffeine are really small or observational. So they're not they're based on survey type data. So not the best gold standard type of research. So I always tell people take it with a grain of salt. But there is a connection between high caffeine intake and imbalance of estrogen. And so people that had 2.5 or more cups of coffee a day had higher estrogen levels. Sorry, I should step back a second. It was Asian and Black women had higher levels of estrogen levels, but in white women, it decreased their estrogen levels.
Interesting. So that's what you mean about taking in.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's and so every, even different ethnicities can process this differently. Now, alternatively, when that caffeine came from soda or green tea, across the all races, estrogen levels were higher. So it also depended on where the caffeine was coming from. Yeah. And again, it was nobody really understands why. They do show that large amounts of caffeine leads to higher anxiety levels in some people due to an imbalance of cortisol. And then there is some research, which you might have even seen me talking about the one day in the Discord, that suggests drinking coffee on an empty stomach in the morning can also decrease insulin sensitivity, increases insulin levels in the body. But always the other side of the coin, they show moderate intake. So 1 to 2 cups of coffee or caffeine per day was shown to decrease the risk of metabolic syndrome. So, and that's even when taken with cream and sugar. So, a lot of people wonder, does it have to be black coffee or, plain? But no, even with cream and sugar, metabolic syndrome rates were lower. But the risk was increased when using artificial sweetener. So people that use artificial sweetener are actually more likely to end up with the metabolic syndrome. We've seen that artificial sweetener can lead to weight gain. There are also changes in testosterone levels, but whether it raises or lowers is actually person dependent. It wasn't even males versus females or white versus black. It was literally just every single person responded differently, but their levels did change.
That's so interesting.
I know. So how sensitive you are to the effects of caffeine varies from person to person, from day to day, different stages of life, and people who drink it regularly are less likely to have the effects than people who don't drink it regularly. And so there's seemingly smaller hormonal changes in the people that have it regularly. And, a good way to kind of put it in day-to-day life is and I know you don't drink coffee yourself, but for the coffee drinkers out there, think about yourself. If you're already feeling stressed or burnt out and you have coffee, how do you feel compared to a day when you're rested or relaxed and you just sit down to enjoy your cup of joe? It really, even myself, I can tell a night that I don't sleep, a night that I'm more stressed, the coffee definitely makes me shake more. Or if I'm nervous for something, I definitely have more of that shaky voice. But if I'm just walking around Sydney having multiple of these lattes a day, I don't feel the effects at all. It's just a nice, enjoying thing.
Yeah.
And then alcohol seems to affect every single hormone negatively.
Oh, shit. That's not the response I expected.
I don't have exact which hormones and why and all of that, because literally it seems every single thing is affected negatively. It increases stress across the board. So a lot of people drink alcohol to relax after a long day, but what it really does is increases stress in your body. And I mean, those who know me know that I wear this Oura ring, right? And it detects all of my everything. It looks at heart rate variability, body temperature, heart rate, all of these things. And every time that I have drank alcohol, my overnight heart rate variability is super low, lower than when I had COVID. My resting heart rate is super high. We're talking walking around high. and my body temperature is usually high. And so, it's very fascinating. It doesn't matter what part of my cycle I'm in. Like, no matter what, if I have alcohol, my numbers are horrible. Anyway, that's not super related. I mean, it is related to hormones, right? But it's just, they basically show across the board that alcohol is horrible for everything.
I definitely thought it was gonna be like one or two hormones that it was gonna like fully affect. I didn't
No.
expect like, no, it's just raising and just destroying all of them.
Yeah, they've pretty much found it affects every hormone.
Cool. Yeah, that's a whole other issue I could go on a tangent on. I won't. Most people know I don't drink. I'll take the occasional sip just to try. It's just, I don't mind the taste so much. It's the feeling I don't like.
Yeah, and I'm there too. I've reached a point where I don't even know the last time I had a drink. I just don't feel good. I got mocktails last time I went out, and I'm like, this feels good. This is enjoyable.
I got a phony Negroni Friday night, and I got one in New York too. They're really fun, but they don't have Sbagliato and Prosecco in it. But I felt cool.
I mean, for me, it's like I like to just have something other than water sometimes, and so it's just nice to kind of. And I don't like soda either; it's just too much for me. So I drink the recess drinks that they have adaptogens in them. So this one uses like magnesium, and I think it's L-theanine, which is found in green tea. And anyway, it has like a nice like calming effect supposedly, and there is some research, again, very, 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 very limited. But it does seem that there are adaptogens that do actually like help with relaxation and minimizing stress hormones and all of that.
I did a bit of that. Actually, I remember talking about it with Jenna when we had our podcast, and I was drinking them. I think I did it like 2 or 3 times a week for a couple weeks. And I got so tired. Like, I got so tired. I made the mistake of like drinking it right before I taught a class, and I was like, oh my God, I'm dragging ass. And my last trip in Georgia, Kristen offered me some. And she's like, do you want some in your tea? I was like, no, I will be out. I can't, like, my body's too sensitive to it. It's not going to happen. Thanks, though. It's just not happening.
It depends on what it is. I, at one point, when my anxiety levels were just atrocious, I decided to try ashwagandha. And so I bought a supplement, and after like a week of taking it, it made my anxiety so much worse. Like, it was awful.
Oh, no.
It was so bad. I like couldn't function. So I was like, ashwagandha, not for me.
Like when people smoke and have the adverse effects of it, you're like, oh, that was not right.
And that's like, I tried a CBD supplement at one point too, and instead of chilling me out, it makes me really angry. Like, I was so mean. So not for me either. I'm gonna stick with like water and no supplements.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat of like all the added supplements. My body's like, no, you're not gonna do that. Okay, since it's summer, everyone's traveling. How do you travel and keep the same hormone levels? Do they go out of balance as well when you travel?
Sam, if you find out, let me know. No, I'm just kidding though. There's a lot that goes on during travel, and especially if you're traversing time zones. So the main things that like you really want to do is just focus on quality sleep, staying hydrated, and bringing healthy snacks. So, what they feed us on the airplane, not usually feeling super great. And it's not that they're bad, right? I mean, I love me some airplane pretzels, but they're not necessarily helping me to like feel good. So to like support sleeping on a plane, bring a sleeping mask, warm clothes, earplugs. And speaking of warm clothes, I always do this, but like I freeze to death on airplanes. I sit there and shake and I'm like, I can't sleep. I can't do anything. And then try your best to drink a normal amount of water. I cannot tell you how many people are like, well, I just dehydrate myself so I don't have to use the airplane bathroom. And really, really messes, right? Like we talked about with the biking lady, really can mess with the hormones, but also just like your overall well-being and just feeling awful. And really kind of trying to stick to like water or herbal tea here because caffeine really can interfere with sleep and your ability to recover well. So I usually bring an empty water bottle to fill when I get through security. Except I say that, and like, let's be honest here, I'm usually the one that's chugging my water bottle in the security line, okay? That was coming back from Sydney. We had to fly through Brisbane, and we didn't know that they would make us go out and go through security again. So we had like 3 completely full water bottles.
Oh, no.
All of them. It's fine. I had like 50 ounces of water in about 2 minutes flat. It was great. And then, again, the airplane snacks are mostly simple carbs. So if you bring like a trail mix or seeds or something with protein, complex carbs, color to help support like anti-inflammatory, sugar balance, all of that. If you know you have digestive issues when you travel, start a few days ahead of time with like higher fiber foods, lots of hydration. Some people even may need to plan ahead for like stool softeners to help promote that digestion ahead of time. And then if it makes you really nervous to fly, mind stilling, meditation, pack ahead. Don't do the frantic pack like I do. Give yourself plenty of time to get through the airport so you aren't playing the game. My sister loves to play the game of can I get through security on time? So, all of the things that can minimize your stress on flying day as well as kind of support your digestion and everything will be the best to kind of keep you as balanced as you can.
So great travel tips.
Do as I say, not as I do.
So is there a way to know if you have a hormonal imbalance, and how do you know if it's caused by food?
So, unless you have a diagnosed hormone condition, the chances are your hormones are exactly what they need to be. So, signs and symptoms of hormonal imbalance are varied because they're as varied as the number of hormones in the body. Most commonly could be things like low energy, mood fluctuations, including anxiety, depression, acne, hair thinning or excess hair growth, weight gain, unexpected weight loss, again, digestive changes, intolerance to like heat or cold, loss of menstrual cycle, a lot of different things. Likely hormonal balance isn't caused just by food, more of a combination of many, many factors that also can include nutrition, stress, and inflammation. But if you're experiencing changes like these, I always recommend seeing a doctor first to rule out other things and to run some labs. Meeting with like a functional nutrition focused dietitian can help you look at the labs and better understand. Nothing against doctors and stuff, but sometimes they look at the labs and say things look fine, and I'll look at things and be like, are they fine? So, just make sure you're going to the right specialists for things. Your PCP cannot know everything. They can kind of get the ball rolling and started, but if things look wonky, going to the specialist is what's important. One example for kind of a hormonal imbalance is like Hashimoto's, which is one of the most common causes for hypothyroidism, and it's an autoimmune disorder. And for the treatment of hypothyroid, it's essential to take artificial thyroid hormone to manage the levels. And you should be doing that under the guidance of an endocrinologist because those are the ones that are specialized in that. But how and when you take the medication, foods that can impair its absorption, dietary pattern that supports thyroid health, like those are all things that can help with your long-term management. So you need to take the meds and be managed by a doctor, but meeting with somebody who understands, a dietitian or somebody that really understands the nutrition and that side of the thyroid health is really important to get the whole picture. One thing I will note though is like I don't recommend getting huge nutritional like hormone panels on your own, and especially not if you don't have like a plan to actually meet with somebody to go over them. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the panels include large amounts of labs that require analysis and with the right lens. If you don't have some background information, like an abnormal lab result could lead to panic or misunderstanding, and it might actually be like no big deal. And I can give one example of that for myself is I did have a doctor order a thyroid panel for me at one point based on a few symptoms I had, but my TSH level, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, came back low, but my thyroid hormone was normal. My T4 was normal. So the doctor was like, it's nothing to worry about. There's actually a really high error rate for those labs. So when you get an abnormal number, you should always get retested. And then, those two, so the TSH and T4 can give like a good starting point, but you actually really need to know more. And so he told me to come back in a month, come in fasted, and get like the whole thyroid panel. And the reason you wait a month is because hormone levels are very slow to change, and especially thyroid hormone levels are very slow to change. And so anyway, so I came back in and everything came back completely normal except for my TSH, which was still low. And so technically the official diagnosis for this is called subclinical hyperthyroidism, but I have no symptoms. All my hormone levels are normal. I just have a lower level of stimulating hormone. And so with that, like it's really not something to worry about. For most people, this is not going to go into overt hyperthyroidism. There's not really too many like additional risks in life with it. It's just sort of like, hey, I just have lower hormone level, or my hormones are more sensitive to this stimulation, and so I need less of the stimulation. But that being said, like if I had ordered my own panel, I can't even tell you how much I would have been freaking out if I had seen that number and didn't have a doctor that like immediately responded to me with like, hey, don't freak out. And so like, and especially like now, like every single time I get a TSH, it's low. And I just expect that now. But like, if I didn't know that, that would have been, I would have, the context and knowing is really important. So not to be like that broken record, but seriously, like always go to a doctor first. Have them decide which labs to run first, and then have somebody who knows what they're looking at actually talk about your lab results with you.
Don't go to the school of Google.
Google was not helpful. Thankfully, my doctor literally responded within like an hour of receiving the labs, so I didn't go too far down the Google spiral, but it was there.
It is always like, here's your lab results, and you look at them, and then you wait almost a day to get a response from your doctor, and you're like, well, thanks. I think I aged like 10 years from this lab result that I couldn't read, and you took forever to get back to me.
The worst part was mine came in on a Saturday, and I was like, oh my God, I have to wait until Monday. And I don't know, he must have just known. He was right on top of that.
Yep. So do you have a couple simple some foods or tips you have for people who want to try and manage hormones with their food intake?
So while every single condition has different factors and things to consider, you can generally take away that a diet high in plants with like a variety of colors, lots of like lean proteins, and then lots of healthy mono and polyunsaturated fats are going to help your body to regulate its best. So I think I talked about it last time, like fruits and vegetables are good sources of fiber, phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals. Nuts, whole grains, legumes are great sources of like selenium and zinc, and seafood has iodine, and fish and chicken have vitamin B6. And so all of these are integral to hormone health. And, healthy fats have these anti-inflammatory properties, and fats like omega-3 fatty acids. So those are the ones that's like mostly found in fish, and then also in like walnuts and flax seeds. Those are a precursor to many of our hormones. And like diets high in saturated fats, so those are those fats that are solid at room temperature. Added sugars, artificial sweeteners, and alcohol can lead to dysregulation. So on top of that, I mentioned pesticides early on. Make sure you wash all your fruits and vegetables. Yes, even your avocado before you cut into it to make your avocado toast, or your watermelon as we get into watermelon season. Even those exteriors that are hard, wash the outside, because the first thing you're doing is cutting straight from the outside and pushing it into the inside. Cool hands and water are good enough. You don't need special soaps or washes.
That was going to be my next question.
Do it every time for every fruit and vegetable. Even your pre-washed veggie mixes, you're better off washing them before you eat them. And then, as Cassian likes to tell us in the Discord every day, drink plenty of water, stay hydrated. That's going to help you optimize your body functions. As with everything else in life, moderation is key. So a single meal or a single day of these inflammatory foods is not going to do harm. It's that habit and the long-term consumption of these things regularly that increase your risk. And then, not to be a broken record again.
But wait, there's more.
Regular exercise, stress management, adequate sleep are super important. So when people come see me as a dietitian, I don't think they expect how much I'm going to talk about like stress, sleep, and exercise, but I do, because it's all part of that. They're all interconnected, and they're all so important. There's a interesting handout that I share with my patients with diabetes, and it's the 42 factors that affect blood glucose, just to show how much is involved in affecting insulin and stuff, right? There's stress and sleep and temperature outside and hormone levels. So people with menstrual cycles, for example, have very differing blood sugars throughout the month. But it's like when they look at it, it's like, oh, it's not just food. It's not just food. It's not just medicine. There's so many things. A personal example for stress was I wore a CGM for a continuous glucose monitor, for a learning experience. And I had a very, very, very stressful event. We're talking like, I was crying, I was shaking, I like could not, I was like a complete mess. And once I calmed down, I had my lunch and it was like 40 grams of carb, which 40, 60 is pretty normal lunch. And my blood sugar spiked to over 200, which like historically we used to think like anything ever over 200, you're diabetic. And I mean, we know that that's not the case now. But anyway, it was like, a meal that probably would have normally kept me in the mid hundreds. I was all the way up over 200 just because of the amount of stress and panic and everything that was going on.
Oof.
Yeah, it's a mess. So there's so many things that go into it, and it's obviously nutrition matters, but there's so many other things that you have to pay attention to too. And my good friend Alana, who in her words has hormone awfulness, also wanted me to make sure that I included that like patience and staying in tune with your body and your cues is critical for figuring out what's going on. So kind of how I mentioned earlier, like knowing your baseline is pretty important. And that's not just for labs, like knowing your baseline symptoms, right? Like if you're just kind of a tired person all the time, like thinking that like, you have to know your level of tired. You have to know your level of energy and what causes you, if you're going to always be tired after a night out, don't assume that it's just like hormone imbalance at that point, right? You kind of have to know your baseline, and that's going to help you navigate the world. And then hormones are slow to change. So it takes time and consistency. And, if you struggle for making changes for the sake of change, just keep focusing on how that makes you feel, because you will notice improvements if you stick with it. The TLDR.
Yeah. Time and patience and trial and error, like so many things that no one wants to focus on, but they are so important and so key.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you jam-packed this episode with so much knowledge that we're asking you for a little bit more. So this week's piece of Cauldron Blessed Wisdom is from Morgan, and the floor is yours.
So Julia Child is quoted saying, "Moderation, small helpings, sample a little bit of everything. These are the secrets of happiness and good health." So food doesn't need to be so hard. If we could all just throw away our programmed thoughts around so-called good foods and bad foods and just treat foods neutrally, we'd feel so much better. Our bodies are really good at telling us what they need, and we are just really bad at listening to them. How many times were you told, "Finish your plate. Take one more bite. You have to try everything on your plate. You can't be hungry right now. You just ate." And on and on. We've been programmed to ignore our bodies, and we have lost trust in our bodies, and our bodies have lost trust in us. Start listening to your body and what it tells you it needs. Your action item for this week is to check in with yourself before, during, and after your meals. Think, how hungry am I? How does this food taste, feel while I'm eating it? How does it make me feel when I'm finished? How full am I when I stop eating? By checking in with yourself and how foods make you feel, you can start relearning how to listen to your body to give it the right foods and the right amount to support your needs to feel your best. By giving your body what it's asking for, you can find a better balance. And by checking in with how foods make you feel, you can better understand your own baseline.
Well, thank you for spilling the caffeine-free tea. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always so much fun.
I know. I feel so much smarter whenever you come on because I don't know anything about nutrition.
Well, I don't know anything about exercise, so here we are.
Yeah, I feel like we're balanced. It's always a great time. And I want to thank all you listeners for listening. And remember, until next time, be strong, kick ass, and be fucking magical every day. This episode was produced by writer Bex Castro and audio engineer Carolyn McMorrin. Special thanks to Morgan Chojnacki for joining this episode. If you'd like to connect with her, you can check out her Instagram at MOMO Books and Eats. Her DMs are always open and in the Discord. Special thank you to Taylor Ash for creating the music of this podcast. And thanks for listening to The Sword and the Ribbon by the Micro Squad. If you're interested in learning more about the Valkyrie Squad, visit us at thevalkyriesquad.com. If you're interested in learning more about the Micro Squad or Geek Gym for a class, visit us at themicrosquad.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts from so you don't miss out. And if you like this week's episode, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts.